Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada. Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma Banda Murita Badana Mate Murita Badana Mate Banda Murita Badana Mate Baba Toria Jai Janara Prasare Baba Toria Jai Janara Prasare Baba Toria Jai Prasare Baba Toria Jai Krishna Prapti Hoya Prapti Hoya Krishna Prapti Hoya Padma Bhagya Vikete Goviya Guru Mukha Padma Bhagya Vikete Goviya Guru Mukha Padma Bhagya Vikete Goviya Ma Bhagya Vikete Goviya Arana Goliya Maneya Goliya Maneya Arana Goliya Maneya Jai Guru Charane Rati Ese Utamagati Guru Charane Rati Ese Utamagati Ye Prasade Pure Savasa Sade Pure Savasa Ye Prasade Pure Savasa Ye Prasade Pure Savasa Sakura Nadi Raje Jamni Jamni Pabuse Jamni Pabuse Sakura Nadi Raje Jamni Jamni Pabuse Ibiga Nere Pakasita Ide Pakasita Dibiga Nere Pakasita Vima Bhakti Jati Avidya Vinasa Jati Jati Vima Bhakti Jati Avidya Vinasa Jati Jati Avidya Vinasa Jati Virigai Janaracharita Racharita Virigai Janaracharita Janaracharita Guru Karuna Sindhu Andama Janara Bandhu Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Andama Janara Bandhu Lokana Lokera Devana Lokera Devana Lokana Lokera Devana Prabhu Gora Doya Deya Mare Parajoya Gora Doya Deya Mare Parajoya Prabhu Gora Doya Deya Mare Parajoya Ibiga Sisi Bhuvana Sisi Bhuvana Sila Prabhupada Bhakti Tapavana Guru Karuna Sindhu Andama Janara Bandhu Guru Karuna Sindhu Andama Janara Bandhu Lokana Lokera Devana Lokana Lokera Devana Prabhu Gora Doya Deya Mare Parajoya Prabhu Gora Doya Deya Mare Parajoya Prabhupada Bhakti Tapavana Bhakti Tapavana Sila Prabhupada Bhakti Tapavana Bhakti Tapavana Jai Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada. Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jai Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Prabhupada. Namo Vishnupadaya, Krishna Prasaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namo Vishnupadaya, Krishna Prasaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nivitesha Sunyavadi Bhatyacharyasatarine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nivitesha Vinyavadi Bhatyacharyasatarine. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Gaura Bhakta-vindam. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Gaura Bhakta-vindam. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Gaura Bhakta-vindam. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Gaura Bhakta-vindam. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Gaura. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Radha, Jamakunda Radha, Jamakunda Radhe, Jamakunda Radha, Jamakunda Radha, Jamakunda Radha, Jamakunda Radhe, Jamakunda Radhe, 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 Jai Radhe Radhe, Jai Radha Jamakunda Radha, Jamakunda Radhe, Jamakunda Radha, Jamakunda Radhe, Jai Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram, Jai Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram, Jai Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram, Jai Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram, Jai Jai Gaura, Jai Jai Gaura, Jai Jai Gaura, Jai Paramahansa Parapachakacharya Satatashi Shri Maharaj Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Srila Prabhupada Ki Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parapachakacharya Satatashi Shri Maharaj Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Saranta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavindi Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Vrindavan Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shyamakun Radhakun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Mathura Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Shri Ram Mayapur Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Ki Jai Gopamanandi all glories are symbol of devotees all glories are symbol of devotees all glories are symbol of devotees all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga.
Hare Krishna. So I'm going to continue reading from this, what I was reading from yesterday. This is from Tamal Krishna Goswami's diary. By the association of the pure devotee, I was being propelled forward on the path of spiritual life. I was chanting 16 rounds, austerely living as a brahmachari, following the regulative principles, always attending classes, and trying to render service in whatever way I was asked. But I was not yet initiated. Initiation meant a lifetime commitment, a final severing of all material connections with old memories, past friendships, and mundane relationships. It meant my accepting the spiritual master as my eternal father, the Vedic teachings as my mother, and the devotees as my family. Initiation would establish my actual connection with Krishna. I had no doubt that Srila Prabhupada was a bona fide spiritual master qualified to take me back to Godhead. He was in an unbroken line of disciplic succession from Krishna himself. He was in perfect knowledge of the Shastra and never spoke anything that did not agree with Vedic conclusions. His actions were above suspicion. Prabhupada was Krishna's pure devotee, and I was ready to surrender my body, mind, and words to him. I had very little idea who Krishna was, but I was certain that Prabhupada had an intimate relationship with Krishna, and that by pleasing him I might one day also be able to please Krishna. The devotees told me that after initiation, the Hare Krishna mantra is more powerful. At the time of initiation, the Guru takes all of the resultant actions of the disciples' past sinful life. To have a bona fide spiritual master was an absolute necessity if one hoped to make advancement and end the cycle of repeated birth and death. And although Mark and I had been living in the temple less than a month, Prabhupada decided that we should receive initiation without waiting any longer. Finish it tomorrow. That was Vishnu Janaswami, was Mark. Okay, so tomorrow is Thursday. His Holiness Bhakti Vikash Swami will be here. He'll give Srimad Bhagavatam class at 8 a.m., and he's doing initiations at 4 p.m. That'll be outside at the Yagyashala area. I think Kalakanta is going to speak first about importance of initiation, and then Kimani and Lacey are going to be initiated tomorrow. Kishore Yatra, if you're going on Kishore Yatra or your girls are, the store Govinda's Gifts will be open from 4 to 6 on Friday before you go, in case you need anything for the trip. Okay, Tamahar Prabhu is giving class today, and these are the devotees who assisted their spiritual master addressing the deities today. Shishi Radha Sham Sundar, Nitai Priya Devi Dasi, Chota Radha Sham Sundar, Guru Prasad Devi Dasi, Shri Krishna Balaram, Manjari Sundari Devi Dasi, Chota Krishna Balaram, Govinda Sangini Devi Dasi, Shri Gornitai Bhadradas, Chota Gornitai Gandharvika Devi Dasi, Guru Zalurna Shringadev, Krishna Kripamoya Das. Haribo.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Bahalaba Giravadid Hari. Gopi Jana Bahalaba Giravadid Hari. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Vraja Jana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jayom Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parvrajagacharya Soter Satashi Shrimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Gaura Premananda. All glories to simple devotees. All glories to simple devotees. All glories to simple devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Garanga. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Stadavade Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Sartarim Gauravana Vishani Nirvishesha Shinyavari Pashchachari Shitarane Jai Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 43, Krishna kills the elephant. Text 31. Janeshvevam Burvaneshu Turyeshu Nindadatsucha Krishna Rama Samabhashya Chanuro Vakyam Abravit Janeshvevam Burvaneshu Turyeshu Nindadatsucha Krishna Rama Samabhashya Chanuro Vakyam Abravit Janeshvevam Bravaneshu Turyeshu Nindadatsucha Krishna Rama Samabhashya Chanuro Vakyam Abravit Ladies? Janeshu, as the people. Evam, thus. Bruvaneshu, we're speaking. Turyeshu, as the musical instruments. Nindatsu, we're resounding. Cha, and. Krishna Ramao, Krishna and Balaram. Samabhasya, addressing. Chanura, the demoniac wrestler, Chanura. Vakyam, words. Abravit, said. Translation purport by the disciples of Srila Prabhupada, and we'll be reading through to text 35, I think. While the people talked in this way, and the musical instruments resounded, the wrestler Chanura addressed Krishna and Balaram with the following words. Purport. Chanura could not tolerate that the audience was praising Krishna so highly. Therefore, he had to say something to the two brothers. Text 32. Chanura said, O son of Nanda, O Rama, you two are well respected by courageous men and are both skillful at wrestling. Having heard of your prowess, the king has called you here, wanting to see for himself. Subjects of the king who try to please him with their thoughts, acts, and words are sure to achieve good fortune, but those who fail to do so will suffer the opposite fate. It is well known that coward boys are always joyful as they tend their calves, and that the boys playfully wrestle with each other while grazing their animals in their various forests. Report. Here Chanura explains how the two brothers came to be expert at wrestling. I don't know if we're going to quite buy that explanation. 35. Therefore, let us do what the king wants. Everyone will be pleased with us, for the king embodies all living beings. Om Jnanatam Randasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshuralimitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Panchakalpaturubhischa Kripasindhudevacha Patitano Pavanebhyo Vaishabhebhyo Namo Namaha. So Chanura feels obligated to speak because we've just heard all of this lavish praise upon Krishna and Balaram by the whole assembly in the arena. Obviously, Krishna and Balaram were the crowd favorites, not Chanura and Mushtika. So he has to give his little talk here. And interesting, he doesn't say anything directly against Krishna at this point. He attributes their mighty prowess at wrestling because they used to wrestle around with the boys, while herding the cows. Didn't have anything to do with his supreme absolute power or anything like that. But then he also talks about the king and the position of the king, very much praising the position of the king, how all the citizens should follow him and worship him. And then we have this last statement, everyone will be pleased with us, for the king embodies all living beings. Now, these statements are not that incorrect if we had a worthy king. But because they're being applied to Kamsa, we can see that they're very erroneous and very misplaced, because Kamsa is certainly not worthy of this type of worship, worthy of this type of praise, adoration, and actually having that high place with the citizenry. Now, in the Vedic system, the king or any leader should actually be followed as the representative of God. So this is actually not incorrect what Chanura is saying if Kamsa were actually qualified. But they do have to be a representative of God, and that's the difficulty. Now, it's interesting that this concept of the king or the monarch being sort of like in the place of God or representative of God is actually very common throughout history. Many cultures and civilizations have similar ideas. In Western Europe, there was the concept of the divine right of kings. You may remember that. This was true in both the Catholic countries and after the Protestant Reformation. Very much they pushed this idea. They developed into, it was actually a philosophy that nobody could actually correct the king or the monarch. Nobody could challenge them because their power and their legitimacy was given by God. Now, that puts you in a very powerful position, as you can imagine. You know, if your position is there ordained by God and nobody can challenge that, it obviously gave him quite a bit of power. And unfortunately, that justification for absolute rule, when put into the hands of people who were not actually qualified, caused so many difficulties. But nevertheless, this is a perverted reflection of an actual process or an actual principle that's given in the Vedas. Srila Prabhupada says in a purport to 227.22 that Kshatriyas, or the ruling administrators of any part of the universe, either of this planet or of other planets, are factually the representatives of the Almighty Personality of Godhead, and they are meant to lead the subjects towards the path of God realization. Every state and its administrators, regardless of the nature of the administration, monarchy or democracy, oligarchy or dictatorship or autocracy, have the prime responsibility to lead the citizens towards God realization. Now, it's interesting to hear Prabhupada, although he says that monarchy is a natural system and the king or the monarch is the representative of God, it's not so much important what the system of government is. What is important is that the leader takes this responsibility and this position and acts on behalf of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, we saw over time the corruption of the monarchy, both in the Western countries, of course, and also, of course, in the Vedic societies. That soon became very corrupt. We can pretty much trace it to the beginning of Kali Yuga. And of course, Kamsa is sort of on the cusp of Kali Yuga, isn't he? The Kali Yuga is really just beginning. You know, in fact, it officially begins when Krishna leaves the planet. You know, that's right, the actual beginning, the date of Kali Yuga beginning. But so here we're only a few years before. So we're seeing this corruption already of the Kali Yuga. And of course, in the Western world, the kings and the monarchs became so oppressive, so autocratic, so without any sense of justice, without any sense of helping the citizenry, that they were pretty much abolished, overthrown, deposed, and systems of democracy, republic systems, and other systems took their place. So this tendency towards corruption is certainly there, and Prabhupada speaks about that. Bhagavatam 4.12.10 purport, Prabhupada says, a king is not meant to simply realize taxes from the citizen and accumulate wealth to spend in sense gratification. World monarchy has failed ever since kings began to satisfy their personal senses with the taxes accumulated from the citizens. Of course, whether the system is monarchy or democracy, the same corruption is still going on. So naturally, there's been a tendency to want to replace these kings, but the corruption is still there. Anybody who is in a position of power, if they're actually not acting on behalf of God, of Krishna, and they're not actually devoting their lives to devotional service, they're naturally going to be material, sense gratification, there's going to be self-interest, and therefore they can't actually fulfill their obligation. Bhagavad Gita 10.27, in Vedic literature, the king is considered to be the representative of God. In this age, however, with the corruption of the principles of religion, monarchy decayed and is now finally abolished. It is to be understood that in the past, however, people were more happy under righteous kings. So sometimes if we talk to people, especially from the democratic countries like America, people can't understand this. They know why in the Vedic literature, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and Bhagavad Gita, we hear about kings and monarchs, and this actually being described as an ideal rule. Because our experience is so different. Our experience is one of corruption, of corrupt leaders, of kings, monarchs, or dictators who simply use that power of position, to fulfill their own desires. Therefore, it's hard to imagine a time when there was actually spiritually advanced rulers, monarchs who had the best interest of the people in mind. So because in Kali Yuga the monarchy has become corrupt, there's naturally going to be the rise of democratic ideas, because people think it's better to elect the corrupt ruler of their own choice. right? In other words, if we're going to have a corrupt ruler, let's at least choose the one that maybe is least corrupt, or at least may favor me, or favor my party, or favor my principles. So you have different factions. And Prabhupada explained that we see that the Shudras, they have tended to put forth the communist and socialist rulers because they favor the working class, the lower class, and of course the capitalists, they support capitalistic governments. They don't really care too much the form of the government as long as, they can thrive. It's interesting, like in China, I was speaking with some of our ISKCON devotee leaders in China, and I was recently in India, and one of them was explaining to me the system in China, and we think of China being communist, but it's really only communist in name. Actually, capitalism is thriving in modern China, but you have a dictatorship. It's really almost more like fascism. What you have is a dictatorial, capitalistic regime. They call it communism for the sake of some ideals that people held to some philosophically more noble cause, but it isn't there. It's really the same old thing. A group of people, an oligarchy, a ruling group, keeping things in control, and all their friends and people who support them are making vast amounts of money. And they are. I mean, capitalists in China are making, there's billionaires there, just like there are in India, America, and everywhere else. So the real concept that we see in Kali Yuga is not so much systems based upon philosophical doctrine or high ideals, whether it be communism, democracy, or whatever it might be, but we see different groups of people who get power and they help their friends, who help them get into power, and, they do the best they can, for themselves. Now, that's not to say that there's never been anybody who had some sense of public service, who didn't try to do something good for people. That may be there. But they really don't know what's good for the people, even if they have good motives. So that's the problem, because they don't understand that's the idea of service to God. And that is really their position. That's really their duty as leaders, is to serve Krishna, to please God, and to make sure that the citizens are working in the same way to please God. And therefore, they don't see themselves as servant anymore. They don't see themselves as servant of God, so certainly they don't see themselves as servant of the people, which is what they really are. Now, in the Vedic times, although there was monarchy, a person had to be qualified. It wasn't just heredity. I mean, it tended to be a hereditary system, but we see that there's exceptions. Somewhere in a very nice, what's the word? A hereditary line, we had King Venu. Obviously, a real anomaly to the system. He was totally corrupt. He was just like modern rulers, almost worse. So what happened? The Brahmins had to take him out. He was deposed actually by the Brahmins, who had that type of power due to their spiritual prowess. And of course, this was a different age, but they had the spiritual ability to actually make changes to the fact that basically they killed King Vena. And they put, of course, his son, who was, well, he had to do some things to create the son, but who was a righteous leader. So the problem is, in Kali Yuga, it's described, everyone is Sudra. We don't have real Kshatriyas who know how to rule properly, and we don't really have real Brahmins who are able to guide and to lead the Kshatriyas. When you read many of these pastimes and stories in the Bhagavatam, you'll see that the king often took advice from the Brahmins, went to his guru, to his spiritual master, and accepted spiritual authority. So the Kshatriya king did not act totally independently. He always acted in conjunction with spiritual advisors, with the Brahmins, with his guru. We see Lord Ramachandra's example. He was always taking advice from his guru and from the Brahmins, and always trying to serve them and to please them. So that's no longer going on. The real ruler, the real leader, we should say, one who actually leads properly, is one who takes very seriously their duty to take care of those that they are in charge of. This is the primary duty. The primary idea is that one cares for those under one. And this means that you have to take care of both the material and the spiritual needs. So in the Vedic times, the great rulers and leaders were very concerned that everyone was happy, everybody was prosperous, things were well managed, people were protected. They were protected from criminal elements and things like that. At the same time, they made sure that sacrifice was going on, religious principles were upheld, and the people were advancing in spiritual life. And we have, of course, many, many wonderful examples throughout the pages of the Srimad Bhagavatam of these types of real spiritually advanced rulers. Lord Ramachandra, of course, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, set the perfect example. It's described in the Bhagavatam 9:1053 how nobody suffered within his kingdom. When Lord Ramachandra, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, was the king of this world, all bodily and mental suffering, disease, old age, bereavement, lamentation, distress, fear, and fatigue were completely absent. There was not even death for those who did not want it. I haven't seen any politicians lately running on such a platform. I will relieve you of all distress, all fear, fatigue, and even death, unless you're ready for it. You know, nobody can make that kind of promise. It'd be ludicrous. Nobody could come through on such a thing. Other example is King Prithu. 4:16:7. This King Prithu will be very, very kind to all citizens. Even though a poor person may trample over the king's head by violating the rules and regulations, the king, out of his causeless mercy, will be forgetful and forgiving. As the protector of the world, he will be as tolerant as the earth itself. That's something we often don't think about. We think of the king, the monarch, having this absolute iron, fist, having this iron rule. Nobody would go up against him. But we see that they were actually the epitome of mercy and compassion. They didn't take personal offense. They only acted to act on behalf of their country, of the kingdom, of the people in general. In the purport, it said, King Prithu is here and compared to the earthly planet as far as his tolerance is concerned. Although the earth is always trampled upon by men and animals, it still gives food by producing grains, fruits, and vegetables. As an ideal king, Maharaj Prithu is compared to the earthly planet. For even though some citizens might violate the rules and regulations of the state, he would still be tolerant and maintain them with fruits and grains. In other words, it's the duty of the king to look after the comforts of the citizen, even at the cost of his own personal inconvenience. Then we have the story of Rahugana and Jad Bharat in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And Jad Bharat gives Rahugana, who was not a bad person, but he got a little bit puffed up, a little bit, feeling I'm the king and I'm the ruler and everybody follows my command, and he's ordering around Jad Bharat. And Jad Bharat takes the opportunity to give him spiritual instruction, which he understood, and he accepted that as good spiritual instruction. Prabhupada says, actually, the supreme proprietor of everything is Lord Vishnu. He is the maintainer of everyone. The king, the father, and the guardian are simply representatives of Lord Vishnu, empowered by him to look after the management and maintain things. It is therefore the duty of the head of the state to maintain the general populace in such a way that people will ultimately know the goal of life. And then Prabhupada quotes Srimad Bhagavatam 7.5.31, a famous verse by Prahlad Maharaj. Tate vidus vartagatim hi vishnum virasya che bahir artam manina antyaya tandayar upaniyamanas te pishatantram varadamni badha. Persons who are strongly entrapped by the consciousness of enjoying material life and who have therefore accepted as their leader or guru a similar blind man attached to external sense objects cannot understand that the goal of life is to return home back to Godhead and engage in the service of Lord Vishnu. As blind men guided by another blind man miss the right path and fall into a ditch, materially attached men led by another materially attached man are bound by the ropes of fruitive labor, which are made of very strong cords, and they continue again and again in materialistic life, suffering the threefold miseries. So it's a very, very clear verdict of our scriptures, the duties of leaders. The duty of leaders is to help their dependents towards devotional service and not be simply like one blind man leading other blind men and they all fall in the ditch. Very nice example, because that's what we see. We see today so many leaders, even if they seem to have some ideals, or they say, we're going to do this, and we're going to help in this way, we're going to change this. They always say they're going to change, don't they? Everything's going to change. You know, we're going to be the party of change. I remember when Obama came in, whenever he came in several years ago, the whole theme was change. Now people are starting to wonder, what's really changed? He might have meant well, but what's really changed? And nothing seems to really change because they're operating under the same materialistic paradigm. And they think that through some laws, through some legislation, you know, through some shifting, you know, some material, you know, organizational system, that they're going to make real change. But real change is going to come about when there is spiritual inspiration, when people are led spiritually to serve the personality of Godhead. So the duty of leaders is to help the dependents towards devotional service, which means to help them become liberated from birth and death. So I was thinking you could imagine an election debate, you know, if people are really on this platform. No, my candidate is actually going to liberate people from birth and death. No, but he doesn't have a good, you know, track record in actually bringing people to Krishna consciousness. My leader, you know, you're not going to hear this conversation probably very much in any upcoming political campaigns. You know, so they're not really focused on the real purpose and the real qualification of a leader. Of course, this duty to help one's dependents become free from the cycle of birth and death is not just the duty of a king or a leader or a president of a country, but is actually the duty of anyone who has any position of authority or anyone who is in a position to give guidance and help to others. Of course, the Lord Rishabhadeva's famous verse 5:18, one who cannot deliver his dependents from the path of repeated birth and death should never become a spiritual master, a father, a husband, a mother, or a worshipful demigod. So this is a very strong instruction, a very important instruction for all of us, because, you know, it's not just a question, well, you know, the political system, the government is corrupt, I don't have to worry about that too much. No, this is actually instruction for every one of us, instruction for all living entities. If we're in any position of leadership, including being a father or mother, because you're in a position of leadership over your children, that you shouldn't take up the responsibility unless you can deliver your dependents from the path of repeated birth and death. Now that seems to be quite a onerous type of instruction. It's quite a responsibility. Obviously, it's Kali Yuga. Things are very difficult. People don't always take the best instruction. Everyone has free will. So sometimes things don't go quite the way that we expect. And we don't always have the results that we hope for. But nevertheless, we must make our best effort. We must make our best attempt in devotional service to please Srila Prabhupada and to please Krishna by helping everyone around us to become Krishna conscious to the degree that we are able. We at least have to take that as our responsibility. Whether we're successful or not, we may not be able to control. But at least we can make the effort, we can make the endeavor to follow Lord Rishabhadeva's, who is, of course, Krishna, his instruction. And in fact, if that is not one's purpose, if that is not one's guiding philosophy or mode of instruction to one's dependents, the dependent has a right to reject such a person. In the purport to that verse, Srila Prabhupada gives examples of where scriptural instances where authorities were rejected because of this principle, because they were not able to liberate their dependents. First, he gives example, of course, Prahlad Maharaj, who rejected his teachers, who were certainly his authority, and his father, who was certainly his authority, because they were teaching against the principles of Krishna consciousness. You know, they were demoniac. So, of course, he rejected them. Bali Maharaj rejected his own guru, Sukacharya. He rejected his advice. Sukacharya told him, don't do it. Don't give him those 3 steps. But he rejected him because that advice was against Vishnu, because he was going against Lord Vishnu's incarnation. Therefore, it was improper advice. Therefore, it was not bona fide. He was not a bona fide guru because he was not acting in the right way. And we have also the example of the wives of the Brahmins. in the Krishna book. Brahmins were very qualified. They were chanting all the mantras. Krishna and Balaram came, asked them, please, can we have something, give us a little bit of something, don't bother us. So, actually the cowherd boys came. And then, and so Krishna says, well, ask the wives, but ask in Balaram's name. What was the reason for that? Because Balaram was a Kshatriya, and he was considered a Vaishya. Was that? I think that was it. He said they might, Balaram might have better luck than me with the Brahmins, because he's the higher caste or something like that. But at any rate, once the wives heard Krishna and Balaram wanted some food, their husbands forbid it. They didn't care. They rejected that, and they immediately went to serve Krishna and Balaram. And that was like the culmination of their life success, to be able to see Krishna and Balaram, to serve them. It's interesting, in one of the commentaries by our acharyas, it's mentioned that after that, there's a point then the Brahmins come to their senses, and they say something like, "The hell with all our Vedic mind." I think it says that literally in the Krishna book. In other words, they're saying, we were so absorbed in our Brahmin status. We were so absorbed in chanting mantras perfectly. We were so absorbed in all the externals of religiosity that we couldn't see that here's the Supreme Personality of Godhead right in front of us. But there's more simple-hearted wives who are able to, through bhakti, through devotion, we're able to simply give to Krishna. Anyway, I was going to say, and our acharyas have commented that after that point, the Brahmins actually accepted their wives as their gurus. And they actually they took instruction for them because they were more advanced in devotional service. They were more advanced in bhakti, and they recognized that, to their credit. Okay. So, we have a very serious responsibility as devotees to give Krishna consciousness to those around us. There's actually two kinds of dependence, when you think about it. There's first those very immediate dependents. If you're a father, you're a mother, you're a husband, you're even a spiritual leader of some type. You have that duty to give shelter to those people. And giving shelter means helping them to advance in Krishna consciousness. So every one of us has that duty. We have, in some way or another, we have the duty to help those around us to become Krishna conscious, and particularly anyone that we have a direct responsibility, a direct duty as a parent, etc. And we also have a responsibility as the natural authorities for the whole world, in a sense. We are representatives of Krishna through Srila Prabhupada. As Srila Prabhupada is our spiritual master, or grand spiritual master, we have been given that duty. We've been given that charge to spread Krishna consciousness throughout the world and to help others to become Krishna conscious and take up the process of chanting Hare Krishna mantra, hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, and associate with devotees, associate with the deities, and take up all these processes of Krishna consciousness. So we are, in that sense, an authority. Not that we have any particular redeeming virtue, except that we have taken shelter of Srila Prabhupada and the disciplic succession. So in that way, we also have that position of authority to give Krishna consciousness to others. And sometimes people accept that. Sometimes people actually listen. They accept that to some degree, and we have a responsibility, to act in such a way. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but it was kind of interesting. I was at this program about a month ago at Polk State University in Lakeland, Florida, and the students and the faculty there, they were kind of a philosophy club or something that came and had regular talks like that. So they were fairly intelligent, fairly interested. Most of them had never heard of the Hare Krishna movement. They didn't even know who we were. So, it was very much introduction to who we are. And interesting, the questions, and 5 or 6 of them stayed after the program was over and continued to ask questions. And most of the questions, interestingly enough, were about karma and reincarnation. Somehow that fascinated them. And so they're at, it's kind of like some of it was almost a little bit, like, well, if this happens and this happens, what do I come back as? And, and of course you try to steer them to the larger picture of, getting free from the cycle of birth and death and this and that. But nevertheless, they were very interested in this, and you take people for where, wherever they're at, where their interest level is, and you try to build upon that to Krishna consciousness. But I thought what was curious was that they were asking these questions, almost as though, not almost as though, is that, I had the answers. I was the authority. Okay, this person's come and I'm the authority on all things about karma and reincarnation. I never really thought of myself that way, but in a sense it's true, because we do have spiritual knowledge that's been given to us, the spiritual knowledge from the scriptures through the Siddhika session and our spiritual master, but they were accepting that. So that's a good thing. If a person accepts some authority from spiritual authorities who are actually properly situated in the parampara, then they're going to make advancement. They're going to gain from that. If they're challenging, if they're not accepting, well, how do you know that? I don't think that, that would have, that's not so good for the spiritual life. But the fact is, if we can somehow convince people of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, or at least give them something of Krishna consciousness. Of course, the most important thing we probably gave is we chanted and handed out prasadam and books. That's probably the real value, not so much all of our talk. But that people are getting something of Krishna consciousness is of such eternal value to them. And that is our obligation. That is our responsibility as devotees. Just as the responsibility of the king or the ruler is to make sure that there's peace and prosperity and that all the citizens are advancing in spiritual life, performing their spiritual duties, that they feel safe and a peaceful atmosphere to progress in Krishna consciousness. So it's our responsibility also to take up this process of Krishna consciousness and to try to give that to everyone that we can. So in that sense, we take that responsibility as the authority, as the Brahmins who are the authorities for all of society. And we also specifically take up the responsibility if we are a father, a mother, a teacher, a leader of any kind, and have that special responsibility towards those under us. Okay. So, that's what I could extract out of these verses and purports. Are there questions or comments? Trivikram Prabhu.
This point may sound a little controversial, but don't take it personally. Kali Yuga has 100 transitional years at the beginning. That's celestial.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch.
Kali Yuga has
Kali Yuga.
100 transitional years at the beginning and at the end.
Okay.
So when Krishna left the planet, that transitional year began.
Mm-hmm.
See? So that is 36,000 human years. So, but after that is when Kali actually starts. In other words, Kali is 1,000 celestial years, which is 360,000 human years. So added with 36 transitional
360,000? I thought it was 428.
Pardon?
That was 428,000. The duration of Kali Yuga?
Kali itself, it's 1,000 celestial years, but it has 200 transitional, one at the beginning and one at the end.
Okay.
So we are at the transitional period.
Transitional period.
Which is 36,000 years.
Oh, okay.
So far, 5,000 has finished. So we still have another 31,000.
So everything hasn't totally degraded yet then.
Right. And the other point, the Bible, sometimes we may say, well, everyone is totally Lord and suited, but then sometimes you find that the Bible, I think the first Bible says, they're almost like suited. Taking from that transitional period, I mean, you could say, some places they still have people practice some degree of.
Yeah, there are different degrees of the modes of nature. And sometimes you'll see more mode of goodness, yeah. Well, I would say it's not like that's not one of our main preaching points, that you're all lower than Shudras, I mean, no. But but we do know that basically it is stated that is that is a fact. And for instance, like, okay, we become initiated Brahmins, but do we have any of the qualities and the powers that Brahmins in former ages had? No, not really. I mean, Prabhupada more or less said that we're Brahmins in training. We're in the training course to maybe become a Brahmin someday. But nevertheless, but the reason that we're not Shudras is because we're Vaishnavas, basically. I mean, that's the real thing. The devotee is really beyond or outside of the Varnashram system by virtue of being a Vaishnava. And so we're not so concerned with the designations, except that we do know that they exist. And Prabhupada has spoken extensively about Varnashram, and it is an actual fact, and we see how those designations play out in the world. And in fact, Prabhupada even gives example of how we can see people acting in those different Varnas, today. So you can say, well, so in other words, Prabhupada gave that example. Some people act as Brahmins, some as Kshatriyas, some as Vaishyas. So those roles are still there. But what isn't there is the qualities. The real quality. Actually, a real Shudra has some good qualities, right? Loyalty, hardworking, right? So in other words, properly situated, all the Varnas have good qualities. So we see people who may seem to act in those Varnas by virtue of work, but not necessarily by quality. That's what it seems like to me. Madanaha? I'll repeat it.
I was remembering that in the fourth canto it mentions that you have the gross body and the subtle body. So most of the time, well actually all the time, the gross body works because of the mind, and the subtle body tells the gross body what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, and that's the karmic situation. But it says when one accepts a spiritual master, instead of functioning according to his mind, he functions according to the spiritual master's instructions. So the body may not have caught up yet. It still has the nature of low qualities that it was born into. But because of the subtle body is giving instructions, the gross body is actually acting like a Brahmin when it's under the instructions of the spiritual master. So
that's a good point, a nice way of understanding that. Because it's true, just like we know Nectar Devotion talks about the different types of karmic reactions, and one of those, I forget the Sanskrit word, so one of those are the things that we are actually experiencing now. In other words, we're born, with a certain intelligence, with a certain, maybe our health issues, or, in other words, those things, we're not going to do much about those. I'm not going to become a whole lot smarter, I'm not going to become, a whole lot healthier instantly just because I become a devotee. So on those material or bodily platforms, those things may be there, and as you said, those haven't caught up with perhaps the development of consciousness that's there in the subtle body.
because they gave that example that you have to take birth as a Brahmin in a Brahmin family.
Mm.
So Prabhupada would say, well, you take birth, yum yum smart bhava, by whatever quality you had at the time of death. But if your mind was by initiation, now taking the qualities and the instructions coming from the spiritual master, that acts as a rectifier. So your body's maybe not born, it is born again actually when you're second initiation, and you get another name, that's the second birth, that your subtle body can change. And I was thinking at the Acharya how we do have a representative of actually the person who is the example, like we were talking about where Ramachandra being the expert leader, or Prithu Maharaj, he's wonderful. We do have an incarnation, a Shakti incarnation, and just like you were mentioning the leader, so of course he is the leader, we think just in one the Hare Krishna movement, but actually he's the leader for the whole world. He set an example, doing it right for everybody, acting as that representative of God. And then he said, after I'm gone, he says you can form a, I think while I was there, a committee, a governing body commission, that individually, maybe one by one, but collectively, they could represent Prabhupada's desire. So I was wondering maybe you could just make a comment on that, because that is the leadership presently on the planet.
Yeah. Srila Prabhupada is an absolutely unique spiritual leader, and we may not see a spiritual leader like that. Who knows how many centuries it may be. But, I mean, we don't know, but we know that Srila Prabhupada is the founder Acharya of ISKCON. He is the Shiksha Guru for this movement for all time. You know, he said, my books will be the law books for 5,000 years. So Srila Prabhupada is that inspiration. He is our Acharya for this movement. Of course, things have to go on in his absence, and we hopefully will be the caretakers of Srila Prabhupada's movement. Prabhupada said, you know, he said, if you cannot increase, at least maintain what I've given you. He said, I've given you everything, at least maintain it. And sometimes I feel like the GBC, best we can do is sometimes hold the pieces together, you know. But if we can even do that, you know, perhaps as a success, you know, because it's very difficult. It's very difficult in the absence of the Acharya when they're gone. But the way I heard the story of what you were referring to, that Srila Prabhupada said, none of my leaders have my qualities. That we can all accept. He said, but he said, every one of you, each of you may have one of my qualities. He said, so together, things can go on. You know, and that's why Srila Prabhupada did not appoint an Acharya. He did not expect a single person or even a few people to take up the task. He really wanted all of his devotees, all of his disciples. And that's why he, as far as the GBC, I know I always feel a lot better, you know, when there's 35 other people making a decision. I mean, 35, which I consider my seniors, very senior advanced devotees. You know, if they're all making a decision, you've got a much better chance of that being a good decision. You know, and even when it isn't a good decision, there's a good chance next year we'll rectify it, we'll change it back. But we make mistakes. Yeah. But, you know, but there is that collective wisdom, and that works on temple levels, that works on all levels, right? You know, if the devotees combine their resources, combine their intelligence, you know, we all work together, whether it's at the temple, whether it's the GBC, whatever it is, you know, we have a better chance of success and a better chance of following Srila Prabhupada and his orders and pleasing him. Right, Parina?
Prabhupada talks about kings and corruption a lot.
Yeah. He didn't.
If you look at even modern theocracies like in the Middle East, you know, where the Saudi Arabian king is in charge, there also you see all kinds of problems. So whenever I came across this, I often wondered, what's the practical utility of this in the modern age? When we see the non-devotee kings, rulers being corrupt, the devotee kings, at least in Islamic societies, and some Christian societies being corrupt. So how does that actually apply to us?
The whole concept of monarchy? Yeah, it looks like it's going to be very, very, at least my feeling about this, in answer to your question, is to be very, very difficult to reimpose a monarchy in Kali Yuga. You know, given the very, very bad history that we've had. Now, who knows? If Krishna consciousness became very, very strong, very powerful, you know, and there was, you know, such an appropriate devotee person who could take that kind of responsibility, I don't know whether it will have. I mean, Prabhupada advocated it in a sense because it's the Vedic system, but I didn't see that Prabhupada ever made a whole lot of plans of who we're going to put in as a king, you know. Really the best thing is for us to act as preachers, you know, to act as Brahmins, really. Prabhupada said we need to establish the Brahmins, you know, who can give advice, who can instruct the general population. Sometimes I think we can have more influence by influencing those who already are in power than trying to get power. It's very difficult, very difficult. I mean, you know, a lot of it's one's karma too. You know, the kind of, you know, that you have that karma, that position to get, you know, those kind of positions of leadership. And often the things you need to do to get those positions, devotees couldn't even do. You know, we couldn't even put ourselves in those situations. But sometimes devotees find themselves in unique opportunities to influence leaders. I was just thinking of a couple, you know, speaking with like someone like Radhanath Swami lately, and, you know, just, you know, he's met President Obama and the Prime Minister and this person, that person. That doesn't mean that did he convert them to becoming Vaishnavas? No, but you know, we make little inroads, and perhaps we'll have more and more ability to have some influence upon the leaders. And I think that's really what Prabhupada had in mind. that, that we begin, because he always wanted us to, he wanted to meet important people, and he wanted us to preach to important people, whether they be academics, whether they be people in government. He was always anxious, he wanted us to actually approach the leaders in the intelligent class of men, the academics, the scientists, and be influential with those people who are already influential in society. So, that's how I see it as our approach, not that we're going to make a plan to how we're going to put a monarch, on head of the U.S. government. Maybe one last.
I was just thinking that in the Bhagavad Gita, you probably know this, he says that this science was first instructed to the saintly kings. Mm-hmm. So it was actually always given to leadership, Manu, Ishvaka, all were leaders. Yeah. Spiritual knowledge is meant for the leaders to be able to disseminate that to others. Whatever examples they set, right? Whatever example.
And that's why we've got kind of a struggle in Kali Yuga. Where, making the world Krishna conscious is not going to be an easy task, because we already have the leaders who are setting a bad example and who are not God conscious. Okay, I'll go to Srila Prabhupada, or you can say.